Taking the call.
Yes, Deputy Speaker.
Member for Solomon has the call.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I want to begin by acknowledging all of the different charities around Australia and everything that they've done to support Australians during this last very difficult period with the pandemic and the effects it's had on Australians and Australian families around this country. It's supported and continues to support so many hundreds of thousands of those, particularly those that have become vulnerable because of insecure work or casual work or haven't been supported by the government's actions. I also want to address something at the outset that was said by a previous speaker, the member for Barker, who was scoffing at the idea of Catholics processing in Palm Sunday and that how fanciful it was that could ever lead to a situation where a government that was overly focused on control and silencing dissent may use this legislation against its own citizens, including those of the Catholic faith, of my faith, but also of other Christian faiths during a procession that we have in Darwin, down the Smith Street of Darwin, for example. Anglicans, members of the Uniting Church and members of our congregation, the Catholic congregation, come together with palms, walking down that street, and at times, of course, led by the message of Jesus, we speak out against injustices. And I'll give you a very clear example, another one, where this legislation could be used unfairly against, in this case, Christian charities. At the moment in Darwin, we have citizens of Iran who fled and came here to save their lives, some of them Christian, some of them not. Regardless, they have been in detention for around 8 years. And what members of various churches, including the Catholic Bishop Charles Gauci, do is go to the fence, where we have a rally at the fence at 5 p.m. in solidarity with these people who are imprisoned within the Darwin airport. Some of them have been released into community detention. There is still one family there. We do not know why the minister is not releasing that last family, but they are there now. Their health and well-being has been deteriorating steadily in the time that I've been visiting them. It's a blight on our nation. Our city, the people that I represent, are sick of it, the injustice, the willful damaging of human beings whose only crime in the eyes of those opposite were to seek asylum. Now, they will be settled overseas in another nation, but until then it escapes our consciousness about how those opposite could not release them into community detention while they wait settlement in another nation. My point being, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this legislation, if there is someone at one of those rallies at 5 p.m. In Darwin every night in solidarity with those genuine refugees, was to come into contact with a member of law enforcement because they happened to get onto the road during one of these rallies, then St Vincent de Paul's charity status, if they happen to be a member of that fine charity that I'm a member of, could have its charity status taken away. I mean, I would just say to the member for Barker that you shouldn't scoff at, one, the traditions in our Christian faith, and two, try and belittle in any way the passion that members of these charities have for human rights and justice. Now, this bill amounts to a continuance of the federal government's crackdown on charities. Now, we all should know in this place how important and valuable charities are to our community. But just think about this for a second. In the Northern Territory, our not-for-profit sector is worth more to our community than mining at the moment. Now, I hope that changes in the future as we open up more mines in the Northern Territory, but it is significant. That's the point. It is a significant part of our community and a significant part of our economy also. So this is about respect. This is about respecting charities, because where do so many billions of dollars of donations to these charities come from? They come from the Australian people. And the Australian people decide to support these charities because they believe in what they're doing. They believe in advocacy. They believe in holding government to account. So you've got to ask yourself, why is this government, after 8 years, continuing to try and crack down and silence charities? More than 10,000 people are employed by Northern Territory charities, with another 11,000 volunteers on top of that, out of our relatively small population. That's significant. And the sector, the charity sector, feeds over $615 million back into the local economy each year. And as I said, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm very proud to volunteer with Vinnie's and veterans organisations with the deductible gift recipient status. Now, are we saying that a veterans organisation that is fighting for a better deal for veterans and a member of one of those veterans organisations comes afoul of this legislation, then the RSL is going to get its charity status taken away? Mates for mates, soldier on. Think about it. There's a lot, after 8 years of this government, that veterans have endured. We had to drag them kicking and screaming to announce a Royal Commission when we had more veterans take their own lives than we've had die in combat after 20 years in Afghanistan. So I just, again, say to the government, think about what this sector does. Now, there's many sectors I could mention in the Northern Territory that do not deserve to be cracked down on. An Aboriginal men's shelter that I'm working with, food bank, variety, paws, looking after animals. Now, I ask the minister that's sitting here with us at the moment, Aboriginal organisations, one of which, a philanthropic organisation, is putting its hand into its own pocket to help the Northern Territory government implement the Aboriginal Justice Agreement. That's new news. It's happened today. So, profitable, not-for-profit sector joining with the NT government to work through and implement the Aboriginal Justice Agreement. Are those opposite really saying that someone who is advocating, using their voice to speak up for those that, unfortunately, as we know, with Close the Gap, has just happened this week, are protesting about deaths in custody, about the shocking rates of Indigenous youth suicide, about human rights abuses? Are we really saying that if any of those individuals use their voice to speak out, then the deductible gift recipient status of some of those organisations will be taken away? Let's think about this and think about who we're silencing. I just think that the Morrison government's proposed governance changes in this sector are alarming and unnecessary, and I do believe they'll do real damage. And unfortunately, they've got form in that they rarely pay attention to this sector, the charities, until they want to slap another gag on the sector's ability to speak up for the Australian people. In the past 4 years, just 2 of almost 60,000 charities have been disqualified for breaking the law. Now, that's 0.003%. So you've got to wonder what is driving this legislation. There is no such thing, Mr Deputy Speaker, as a charity crime wave. The changes would merely give the coalition another set of tools to shut down any criticism. They want charities to be seen, but not heard. Charities can already be deregistered for breaking the law, and their staff members and volunteers can face penalties already. The coalition, those opposite, want to go even further. Their unfair proposed new rules go far beyond anything that applies to political parties, businesses or other organisations, and if enacted, a charity could be deregistered for the most minor offences imaginable. And again, the member for Barker scoffed at one such minor incident that might have been caused, either wittingly or unwittingly, by a religious organisation. It's absurd. What's more, a charity could be shut down if the Charities Commissioner believes a minor breach could occur in the future. I mean, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is absurd. It's wading into Minority Report territory. Do you remember, Mr Speaker, that film with Tom Cruise, where they go around getting people before they're even committed a crime? I mean, that's the sort of territory we're getting into here. It reminds me of another Tom Cruise movie, Top Gun. And I know the Assistant Shadow Minister.
I think the member for Solomon's drawing a long bow when he starts talking about Top Gun in this regard, unless he's drawing the reference to Minority Report being from Tom Cruise. But I'll allow the Speaker to go on a bit further, but I'm going to bring you back to your point.
Fair enough too, Deputy Speaker. But I guess what I was getting at is I want those opposite to stop using our charity sector as a shield. Good for the photo op, but don't say anything, don't advocate, all right? Because if any members of yours do anything wrong, we'll take your DGR status off you, the very thing that members of our nation, citizens of our nations, use to make donations to those organisations because they believe in what they're doing. Stop using these shields. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is the final Tom Cruise reference, but it goes to another movie, and it is A Few Good Men. And that's what we need, a few good men, because they're mostly men on that side, to say, look, we can handle the truth. We can hear what charity sector members have to say. We're not afraid of criticism, and we're not going to strip away your ability to operate if you step over the lines that we keep drawing in front of you. Even the Charities Commissioner himself, Gary Johns, has already said under questioning during Senate estimates that he's seen no evidence to support the changes to the regulations. I think the Liberals' own review recommended the existing regulations around unlawful conduct should be scrapped, but instead the Morrison government want to dramatically expand the scope of the activities the regulations could capture. I believe these changes will be terrible for our democracy. Freedom of speech is important. We hear it from those opposite all the time, and it's inconsistent with what they're doing with this legislation. NT Costs, which is our peak body for our local community sector in Darwin, the CEO, Deb Di Natale, says the regulations are a case of extreme overreach and it's not clear what problems they are meant to solve. And with only 0.003 of incidents in this area, it's hard to see what problems they are meant to solve. Now, Scott Morrison should not give Commissioner John, someone who was criticised beyond blue, and recognise that the minister here with us will be well aware of their work, and sees Australian charities as rife with impure altruism. More tools to strip. We don't want Commissioner Johns, I should say, more tools to strip the charitable status of organisations that just raise their voices to criticise governments, whether it be the current government or the future Labor government. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, in summing up, I've worked in the charity sector, the not-for-profit sector, and I stand with faith groups and the community sector who oppose these very concerning changes. Labor values the contributions that charities and not-for-profits make to our civil society. public discourse and the democratic process, and we'll do everything that we can to protect that important